Most people do not lose their lives all at once. They lose them slowly, quietly, through small acts of neglect that feel harmless in the moment. They wake up with intentions, but fall asleep with excuses. They plan change, but repeat habits. They wait for motivation, clarity, or the perfect moment, unaware that this waiting is the very thing draining their potential. Discipline begins when that waiting ends. Not loudly, not dramatically, but internally, when a person decides that their inner world will no longer be ruled by impulse, emotion, or comfort. Discipline is misunderstood because it is often associated with punishment or restriction. In reality, discipline is self-respect expressed through action. It is the decision to treat your future self with care, even when your present self feels tired, bored, or resistant. The disciplined mind understands that comfort is temporary, but the consequences of avoiding growth are permanent. Every day, whether consciously or not, you are training yourself to become someone. Discipline simply makes that training intentional. The human mind naturally seeks ease. It avoids effort, pain, and uncertainty whenever possible. This is not a flaw, but an ancient survival mechanism. The problem arises when this instinct governs a modern life that requires focus, responsibility, and long-term thinking. Without discipline, the mind drifts toward distraction. It seeks stimulation instead of meaning, relief instead of progress. Over time, this creates inner chaos. Discipline is the structure that brings order to that chaos. One of the greatest shifts a person can make is understanding that emotions are not directives. Feeling tired does not mean you must stop. Feeling unmotivated does not mean you must quit. Feeling afraid does not mean you must retreat. Emotions are information, nothing more. Discipline is the skill of acting in alignment with your values, not your feelings. This skill is not developed through motivation, but through repetition. Every disciplined action strengthens an internal identity. Each time you act despite resistance, you reinforce the belief that you are capable of self-control. This belief compounds. Over time, it becomes confidence. Not loud confidence, not performative confidence, but quiet certainty. The kind that does not seek validation because it is grounded in evidence. You know what you can handle because you have handled it before. Most people believe they need to change their circumstances to change their lives. In reality, they need to change their standards. Discipline begins with standards. Standards for how you speak to yourself. Standards for how you spend your time. Standards for what behavior you tolerate from yourself. When standards are low, excuses feel acceptable. When standards are clear, excuses feel uncomfortable. Discipline lives in that discomfort. There is a cost to every choice, even the ones that feel easy. Skipping effort today costs you momentum tomorrow. Avoiding discomfort now costs you resilience later. Discipline is the willingness to pay a small price now to avoid a much larger one in the future. It is the understanding that pain delayed is pain multiplied. Growth embraced is growth simplified. Silence plays a central role in discipline. A disciplined person does not explain every decision. They do not announce every goal. They do not argue with every opinion. Silence conserves energy. It creates space for focus. When you stop externalizing your intentions, you internalize your commitment. You move from talking to doing, from imagining to executing. Discipline also teaches patience. Progress rarely announces itself. Results often lag behind effort. This delay is where most people quit. They confuse lack of immediate feedback with lack of effectiveness. Discipline trusts process over mood. It understands that consistency compounds invisibly before it becomes obvious. Just as decay happens slowly before collapse, strength builds quietly before breakthrough. The disciplined mind is not rigid. It is adaptable. Discipline does not mean forcing yourself through burnout. It means listening intelligently without surrendering control. Rest becomes intentional, not escapism. Work becomes focused, not frantic. Balance emerges not from doing less, but from doing what matters with clarity. There is power in returning. Discipline is not perfection. Everyone slips. Everyone fails moments of self-control. What defines discipline is not the absence of failure, but the speed of return. Returning to routine, returning to standards, returning to intention. Each return strengthens the habit of resilience. Over time, discipline reshapes identity. You stop seeing yourself as someone who tries and start seeing yourself as someone who acts. This shift is subtle but transformative. When action becomes your default response, opportunities multiply, not because the world changes, but because you are ready to meet it differently. The disciplined person does not seek intensity, they seek alignment. Alignment between thoughts, actions, and values. This alignment creates inner peace. When you live in alignment, your mind stops fighting itself. Decision fatigue fades. Regret diminishes. Life becomes simpler, not easier, but clearer. As discipline deepens, emotional regulation improves. You no longer react impulsively to frustration, criticism, or stress. You pause, you observe, you choose. This pause is where strength lives. Most conflict is born from reaction. Most wisdom is born from restraint. Discipline teaches you to respond, not react. The world often rewards noise, speed, and display. Discipline operates in the opposite direction. Quiet, slow, consistent. This is why disciplined people are often underestimated. Their strength is not visible until it is undeniable. By the time others notice, the foundation has already been built. If you continue down this path, something changes inside you. You stop seeking shortcuts. You stop bargaining with your potential. You stop waiting for permission. Discipline removes the need for external motivation because your internal standards guide you forward. This is only the beginning. Discipline is not a destination, but a way of living, a way of thinking, a way of relating to yourself. As this understanding deepens, you will begin to notice how much of life becomes lighter when you stop resisting what must be done. And this awareness grows quietly, through daily choices, through silence, through consistency, through discipline. The moment a person commits to discipline, something subtle begins to shift beneath the surface. At first, nothing looks different from the outside. Life continues with the same demands, the same pressures, the same distractions. But internally, a line has been crossed. The mind begins to recognize that it is no longer in full control. Habits that once dictated behavior now face resistance. Comfort is questioned. Impulses are observed instead of followed. This internal resistance is uncomfortable, and that discomfort is not a sign of failure. It is evidence of change. Most people mistake discomfort for danger. They interpret mental resistance as a signal to stop. Discipline teaches a different interpretation. Discomfort becomes information, not instruction. It is simply the nervous system adjusting to a new standard. When you stop running from discomfort, you stop being ruled by it. This is one of the most important lessons discipline offers. Growth feels unfamiliar before it feels empowering. There is a moment in every disciplined journey when the old version of the self fights back. This version is clever. It uses logic, emotion, and memory to justify returning to familiar patterns. It reminds you of past failures, it highlights uncertainty, it exaggerates effort and minimizes reward. This internal resistance is not your enemy. It is a signal that you are moving beyond what is familiar. Discipline does not eliminate this voice. It simply refuses to negotiate with it. Negotiation is where most people lose momentum. They bargain with themselves, promising effort later in exchange for comfort now. Discipline removes negotiation entirely. It replaces it with non-negotiable standards. Certain actions become automatic, regardless of mood. This automation is not robotic. It is liberating. When decisions are already made, energy is conserved. The mind relaxes because it no longer needs to argue. Structure plays a critical role in this process. A disciplined life is structured but not rigid. Structure creates predictability, and predictability reduces anxiety. When you know what is expected of you internally and externally, uncertainty decreases. Discipline thrives in predictable environments because predictability removes friction from action. Chaos breeds indecision. Structure breeds clarity. One of the greatest misconceptions about discipline is that it requires extreme effort. In truth, discipline reduces effort over time. At first, action feels heavy because it conflicts with old habits. Over time, repetition turns effort into routine. What once required willpower becomes natural. This is how discipline compounds. The early stages are difficult. The later stages are stable. Most people quit before reaching stability. Patience is an overlooked component of discipline. The mind wants immediate feedback. It wants confirmation that effort is working. Discipline teaches delayed gratification not as a moral lesson, but as a practical necessity. Many of the most valuable changes in life produce no immediate signal. Mental strength, emotional control, focus, and self-respect develop quietly. If you rely on constant feedback, you will abandon progress prematurely. As discipline deepens, the relationship with time changes. You stop rushing, you stop procrastinating, you stop living reactively. Time becomes something you allocate intentionally, rather than something that escapes you. This shift reduces stress dramatically. Stress often comes not from workload, but from lack of structure. Discipline provides that structure. Another transformation occurs in how disciplined people relate to failure. Failure stops being personal, it becomes informational. Instead of self-judgment, there is analysis. What broke the system? What allowed distraction? What weakened consistency? This emotional neutrality is a powerful advantage. When failure loses its emotional charge, it loses its control over behavior. Emotional discipline is not suppression, it is regulation. Suppression ignores emotion. Regulation understands it without surrendering to it. The disciplined mind allows emotions to exist without allowing them to dictate action. This creates inner stability. You become less reactive, less volatile, less dependent on external conditions for internal balance. Many people search for confidence through affirmation, appearance, or achievement. Discipline builds confidence at a deeper level. Confidence becomes a byproduct of reliability. You trust yourself because you have evidence that you follow through. This trust changes how you move through the world. You speak less but with more certainty. You promise less but deliver more. You do not chase validation because your self-respect is internally anchored. As this internal trust grows, fear begins to lose its influence. Fear does not disappear, but it no longer dictates behavior. You act despite fear because discipline has taught you that fear is temporary, while regret is permanent. This understanding reshapes decision-making. You stop choosing based on comfort and start choosing based on alignment. Discipline also alters how you perceive other people. You become less affected by opinions, criticism, and comparison. Not because you are indifferent, but because your focus is inward. You measure progress against your own standards, not against external noise. This inward orientation creates stability in a world designed to distract. One of the quiet benefits of discipline is simplicity. Life becomes simpler when unnecessary choices are removed. You wear similar routines, you protect your mornings, you reduce exposure to distraction. Simplicity is not deprivation, it is clarity. It allows you to direct energy toward what truly matters. Consistency becomes a form of self-communication. Each repeated action sends a message to the subconscious. This matters. Over time, these messages reshape identity. You stop seeing discipline as something you do and start seeing it as who you are. This identity shift is the foundation of lasting change. There will still be days of resistance. Discipline does not eliminate difficulty. It changes your relationship with it. Difficulty becomes expected rather than alarming. You stop being surprised by effort. This expectation builds resilience. When hardship arrives, you are already prepared to meet it. The disciplined life is not free of doubt. It is free of paralysis. Doubt may exist, but action continues. Discipline understands that certainty is rarely available before action. Clarity often follows movement, not the other way around. This understanding prevents stagnation. Over time, discipline creates momentum. Momentum simplifies everything. Decisions feel lighter, effort feels smoother, progress feels natural. This momentum is fragile at first, but powerful once established. Protecting it becomes a priority. Disciplined people guard their routines because they understand what they cost to build. Eventually, something profound happens. The mind stops resisting structure. It begins to crave it. Order feels calming. Consistency feels grounding. Discipline becomes a source of peace rather than pressure. This is the stage few people reach, not because it is impossible, but because it requires persistence through boredom. Discipline is not dramatic. It does not announce milestones. It does not celebrate loudly. It simply continues. And in that continuation, lives are reshaped. This process is not fast, but it is reliable. It does not promise transformation overnight, but it delivers it over time, quietly, predictably, permanently. And as this path continues, the discipline that once felt heavy becomes the foundation that holds everything else steady. As discipline becomes more deeply ingrained, the struggle shifts from external behavior to internal refinement. At this stage, the challenge is no longer about starting, but about sustaining. Many people can force change for short periods. Few can maintain it without turning discipline into rigidity or burnout. True discipline evolves. It becomes quieter, more intelligent, less forceful. It stops feeling like resistance and starts feeling like alignment. One of the most important adjustments at this level is learning when to push and when to pause. Discipline is not relentless pressure. It is calibrated effort. The disciplined mind recognizes fatigue without surrendering to it. Rest becomes strategic rather than escapist. There is a difference between recovery and avoidance. Discipline teaches you to tell them apart. At this stage, awareness sharpens. You begin to notice subtle shifts in attention, small lapses in focus, early signs of distraction. Discipline no longer waits for collapse to intervene. It corrects course early. This is one of its greatest strengths. Small corrections prevent large failures. The undisciplined mind ignores small issues until they become overwhelming. The disciplined mind addresses them while they are manageable. Identity now plays a central role. You are no longer trying to become disciplined. You are protecting an identity that already exists. Actions are no longer motivated by guilt or fear of failure, but by consistency with who you believe yourself to be. When identity aligns with behavior, discipline becomes self-reinforcing. Acting out of alignment feels uncomfortable, not because of external consequences, but because it violates internal coherence. At this level, distractions lose much of their appeal. Not because they disappear, but because they no longer offer relief. The disciplined mind has learned that distraction does not solve discomfort. It delays it. Awareness replaces avoidance. When discomfort arises, you face it directly. This reduces its intensity. Most discomfort grows because it is resisted. Discipline removes that resistance. Another transformation occurs in how you perceive effort. Effort stops being associated with struggle and starts being associated with purpose. When effort serves a clear direction, it feels meaningful rather than draining. Discipline clarifies that direction. It connects daily actions to long-term values. This connection sustains consistency far more effectively than motivation ever could. Emotional discipline deepens further. You become less reactive, not because you suppress emotion, but because you understand its transient nature. Emotions rise and fall regardless of action. Acting in alignment with values stabilizes the inner environment. Over time, emotional volatility decreases. Calm becomes the baseline, not the exception. At this stage, silence becomes increasingly powerful. You speak less about what you are doing and more through what you produce. You no longer seek external acknowledgement because internal alignment is sufficient. This does not create isolation, it creates autonomy. You are connected without being dependent, present without being reactive. The disciplined mind also develops humility. Discipline reveals how much of life is shaped by daily choices rather than talent, luck, or circumstance. This understanding removes arrogance and self-pity equally. You stop blaming the world and stop exaggerating your own importance. Responsibility becomes neutral, empowering rather than heavy. Consistency now extends beyond habits into mindset. You approach challenges with steadiness rather than urgency. Problems are addressed methodically rather than emotionally. This reduces unnecessary stress. Many people suffer not because problems are severe, but because they respond chaotically. Discipline brings order to response. Over time, discipline reshapes ambition. Goals become clearer, but less frantic. You are no longer driven by comparison or external pressure. Ambition becomes internal, grounded in personal standards. This reduces anxiety while increasing effectiveness. You move steadily rather than urgently. Progress accelerates without feeling rushed. There is also a noticeable change in how you relate to uncertainty. Uncertainty no longer paralyzes you because discipline has taught you to act without guarantees. You understand that clarity often emerges through action, not before it. This reduces overthinking. Decisions are made based on principle rather than prediction. As discipline stabilizes, you become more selective. You protect your time, energy, and attention. Not aggressively, but deliberately. You understand that saying yes indiscriminately weakens consistency. Boundaries strengthen discipline. They prevent dilution of focus. This selectivity simplifies life further. One of the quiet markers of this stage is reduced internal noise. The constant self-criticism, doubt, and second-guessing diminish, not because you believe you are flawless, but because you trust your process. Self-trust replaces self-monitoring. You no longer need to constantly evaluate yourself. You simply act. Discipline also influences how you experience success. Success feels less intoxicating and more grounding. You appreciate progress without becoming attached to it. This emotional neutrality prevents complacency. You continue working not because you fear losing progress, but because consistency feels natural. Failures, when they occur, are absorbed without drama. There is disappointment, but not identity collapse. You adjust and continue. This resilience is one of discipline's greatest gifts. Life becomes less destabilizing. Highs and lows smooth out. Stability replaces volatility. At this point, discipline is no longer something you manage. It manages you. It guides decisions automatically. It filters impulses. It maintains alignment even under pressure. This does not make life effortless, but it makes it coherent. The disciplined mind becomes difficult to disrupt. External chaos no longer creates internal chaos. Stressful situations are met with presence rather than panic. You respond thoughtfully because discipline has trained you to pause. This pause is where wisdom lives. Over time, others may notice a change. You appear calmer, more reliable, less reactive. They may not understand the source of this stability. It is not charisma or confidence in the traditional sense. It is internal order, discipline expressed through behavior. This stage is not an endpoint, it is a foundation. Discipline continues to evolve as life changes. New challenges require new adaptations, but the core remains the same. Alignment over impulse, consistency over intensity, action over emotion. And as discipline continues to integrate into every area of life, something becomes clear. The external world has not become easier. You have become stronger, more grounded, more capable of navigating complexity without losing yourself. This is the quiet power of discipline, not control over the world, but mastery of self. As discipline matures fully, it becomes almost invisible. It no longer feels like effort, control, or resistance. It becomes the natural way you move through life. Decisions are made calmly. Actions follow without internal debate. The mind no longer oscillates between extremes of motivation and exhaustion. Stability becomes the defining quality. This stability is not stagnation. It is grounded momentum. At this level, the disciplined individual understands that mastery of self is a lifelong practice, not a destination. There is no finish line where effort disappears. What changes is the relationship with effort. Effort is no longer feared, it is no longer dramatized, it is accepted as part of meaningful living. This acceptance removes friction. Life feels lighter not because challenges vanish, but because resistance to them fades. One of the clearest signs of deep discipline is emotional sovereignty. You experience emotions fully without being consumed by them. Joy does not make you reckless. Pain does not make you collapse. Anger does not hijack your behavior. You feel everything, but you act deliberately. This emotional balance creates a sense of inner dignity. You are no longer at the mercy of moods or circumstances. The disciplined mind also develops a profound sense of patience. Not passive waiting, but active endurance. You understand that meaningful results unfold on timelines that cannot be rushed. You stop pressuring outcomes and start refining process. This patience removes anxiety from ambition. You work steadily, trusting that consistent effort will reveal itself in time. At this stage, discipline reshapes how you relate to success and failure entirely. Success no longer inflates the ego. Failure no longer defines identity. Both become temporary states rather than personal verdicts. You remain centered regardless of outcome. This emotional neutrality allows you to continue improving without distortion. Silence becomes increasingly central to your strength. You are comfortable not explaining yourself, not defending your choices, not seeking agreement. Silence is not withdrawal, it is confidence without display. You understand that energy spent proving is energy stolen from doing. Discipline teaches you to let results speak. The disciplined life also fosters gratitude, not superficial appreciation, but grounded awareness. You become grateful for structure, for routine, for the ability to direct your own behavior. Gratitude stabilizes ambition. It prevents dissatisfaction from eroding discipline. You want more, but you are not restless. This balance is rare and powerful. As discipline integrates fully, you notice a decrease in internal conflict. The mind stops pulling in opposing directions. Desires align with values. Actions align with identity. This alignment creates inner peace. Peace not as escape, but as coherence. When you live coherently, your energy stops leaking. Discipline also clarifies purpose. Purpose is not found through searching. It emerges through consistent engagement with meaningful effort. As discipline narrows distraction, what matters becomes obvious. You stop chasing multiple directions and commit fully to fewer, deeper pursuits. Depth replaces breadth. Fulfillment replaces stimulation. At this stage, self-trust is complete. You trust yourself to act when necessary, to rest when appropriate, to adjust when required. This trust removes fear of the future. You know you will handle what comes because you have handled what has already come. Confidence becomes quiet certainty rather than bravado. The disciplined person becomes resilient without becoming rigid. Adaptability remains intact. You adjust strategies without abandoning standards. You evolve without losing identity. This flexibility ensures discipline remains sustainable rather than brittle. You bend without breaking. One of the most profound shifts is how you experience freedom. Freedom no longer means doing whatever you want. It means being able to do what you must without resistance. This freedom is internal. External circumstances matter less because internal governance is strong. You are free within structure. Discipline also deepens empathy. As you master yourself, you become less judgmental of others. You understand how difficult self-regulation truly is. Compassion replaces superiority. You lead through example rather than instruction. Your presence influences more than your words. As years pass, discipline leaves visible traces. Health stabilizes. Relationships improve. Work quality increases. Stress decreases. Not because life is easier, but because responses are wiser. Discipline accumulates quietly, shaping outcomes in ways that appear effortless to outsiders. Eventually, discipline becomes legacy. Not something you talk about, but something others observe. Reliability, calm, consistency, integrity. These qualities define you. They are the result of thousands of small decisions made correctly when no one was watching. This is the true reward of discipline, not applause, not recognition, but internal order. The ability to meet life as it is without losing yourself, to act with clarity amid uncertainty, to remain steady when others scatter. Discipline is not domination, it is harmony. Harmony between mind and action, between desire and direction, between effort and rest. When this harmony exists, life flows more smoothly, even when it is difficult. There will always be challenges. Loss, change, uncertainty are unavoidable. Discipline does not remove pain, but it prevents suffering from compounding unnecessarily. It gives you the capacity to endure without collapsing, to adapt without surrendering, to continue without bitterness. When you reach this point, discipline is no longer something you practice. It is something you embody. It informs every choice, every response, every silence. It becomes the quiet force guiding your life forward. And from this place of internal mastery, you realize something simple and profound. The world was never meant to be controlled. Only the self. That is where true power has always lived.